Hello, I'm Loren Sederstrom. I'm the host of the All Around Grant Show, and today I have with me Larry Lanou, my co-host, and we have an interesting show for you. We're going to be giving you a little history lesson today, going back, talking about the Bel Air dump and how it is affecting the environment today, because there's been two recent sewage spills. We're also going to be talking about the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission is just starting to wrap up. They've just had an attorney review, and we have some interesting clips from that. But I think, Larry, you have a congratulations to shout out. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, I think some of you people remember our first city council meeting. I was reprimanded for hosting the U of M equestrian team out of my stables, and currently my daughter is sitting right there out in Ohio. A couple of her members made it to the national competition, college competition, so they're out there competing, and maybe next week or next time we show you and tell us some of the results coming back there. But it's pretty instrumental. These kids spend, while they're going to school, their time also representing the U of M, and both our equestrian teams, both our Western Pleasure and our English Pleasure team are, for the state of Minnesota, show out of the city of Grant. In fact, my daughters coach both of them, so pretty interesting, pretty proud that they, got a couple more members qualified to go to the Nationals, and that's where they are this weekend as we speak.
Well, thank you, Larry, for shouting that out. Now we're going to go back and do the little history lesson. Now, Larry and I have been dealing with this for a number of years. We were both on the Planning Commission when they put Wildwood School in a former Superfund site that was put into the VIC program, and we'll establish the timeline a little later. We're going to have lots of documentation to show you exactly where it is and how it got to what it is today. But we want to back up, and we started this. Remember, we had a bill in the legislature, 775 in the Senate, 959 in the House, called No School in a Dump Site, and it got waylaid. It got shot down in education policy because Chuck Uygur said, hey, if that bill goes through education policy, you're not going to get your 6 bills through education finance. So that got put down. But anyway, so we've been fighting this pollution situation for a long time. And so what we're going to take you back to the very beginning. In the first clip we're going to show you, we went to Columbia Heights, where they have 5 Superfund sites within a mile of each other. And we're going to reintroduce you to Erin Brockovich and her speaking. We have a few clips from that, so if Control Room could run it, please, thank you.
And start working together and finding out what is happening to these communities. We expect our children to clean up their bedrooms. I think it's time that we expect of ourselves to clean up our mess and begin to take a look at what we've done and what might be happening to the people. Because nobody's coming back in to tell you. How many of you knew you had 6 Superfund sites?
There. And that was interesting. That was, what, a little over 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah, and that was in Fridley, where it was pretty well known they had some big industrial deals. But were you aware we had 2 Superfund sites just in the city of Grant?
Well, that's just it. We didn't know that. And everybody covers it up. And one of the things, the further history, back in the 70s, when the federal government did an inventory of these Superfund sites, they said, oh, shucks, or something like that. We have way too many of them. And they came in with a VIC program. And a VIC program is a voluntary incentive and cleanup. That means if you come forward and admit you're a bad boy, we'll slap your hands and let you go away with a Band-Aid. Well, this is exactly what they did to Bel Air Sanitation. They kind of did a quick fix for it, and but let's go on to see what the front man, Bob Bowcox, he's the engineer that does the work for Erin Brockovich, what he says about putting a school on a former Superfund site. So if Control Room could play that.
It's sad that you have to use your efforts on something like that, because it's pathetic to consider redevelopment of any former industrial site into a school, or those types of facilities. I mean,
easy to keep watching the kids because you'll blow in the dark at night,
It's just one of those things. It's called just say no, because it's one of those types of things. Is that there's no amount of science that's going to give me personally the security to put my kids in that school. So just don't. There's enough places you can do it elsewhere.
There. Now, he was reacting to that. We fought a good fight. We lost. But there are other repercussions other than the children's health. And that's what we're seeing and we're going to trace today to let you guys know that the compounded errors that have occurred and are now poisoning. There's mercury in Lost Lake. It's going into White Bear Lake. And of course, you know, White Bear Lake, they say there's holes in the bottom of that where it drops into the groundwater. Well, they've had 2 major sewage spills. And the first one was 440,000 gallons. The second one was 140 or 50.
But it's up close to 200,000 already.
And so in some of the toxins that are in there, pesticides, herbicides, heavy metal, bacteria,
mercury.
When that goes from Lost Lake into White Bear Lake, and if the water's going down into the aquifer, where do you think the pollutants are going, folks?
And where do you think they're coming from?
And someone wasn't thinking very far ahead.
But Loren, just to give you an idea, he said, just say no, there's no amount of research. And folks, they had the opportunity. And as we get a little further in now, I'll show you, we've got a book here with all this documentation in there. Every one of the different documentation that says we should have never put a school on a dump. Our city was well aware of it well before they did that. Both Mayor Marshall and Mayor Carr instrumental in getting that school placed on a Superfund site. And let me tell you, folks, I'll guarantee you that Tom Carr rode that short bus to school, and he went past Bel Air Sanitation on his way to school. And Mayor Marshall, he was there the day the dump probably opened. So they can't say they were unaware it was a dump site.
Well, the other thing we're trying to chronicle is multiple governmental missteps. This got us to pollution disaster. We're talking, this is an environmental disaster that's happening. Granted, the whole world isn't falling apart, but there are serious implications. So the other thing is we're going to start this journey with the next clip. When we were on the Planning Commission, we asked, what about the 2 worst sites where there was the sludge, the leaking tanks? One of the commissioners, Terry DeRozier, asked about where was the specifications for the 2 worst sites. And this will show exactly the response he got. Control room?
On the site borings that were done, hate to belabor the point, I was looking for site boring 32, 71, and 63. And I could not find them in the spec book. Were they in there somewhere? I mean, who produced this? Didn't your company produce it?
We just got that information from the engineer on there. I can't answer
I'd gone through a lot of the boring samples, and I couldn't find number 32, number 63. None of the borings that were done in the eastern dump site are included in this site report.
That's correct.
Is there a reason for it?
I'm not sure what's your question is.
Why aren't they there?
Because we're not doing any work in those locations. Those borings are there to help the contractor prepare their bids so they understand what kind of material is going to be excavating into and moving around, that sort of thing. And because we're not proposing any work in those areas,
this is the school on the east side.
There's no point in filling it.
Well, Loren, I like that. Well,
that's what's interesting is the school is on the direct east side, and that's where they put the
holding tanks.
Well, the holding tanks, but they also put the membrane underneath the school and the HVAC system. So I mean, there again was a blatant lie.
He didn't want to, clutter the spec book up with that information, and he did it just for the boring so that people knew what they were digging through. But folks, we got state documents that say they cannot go through a contaminated site. If you look at the borings, those are the most toxic sites that were there. They were the ones closest to the school. Now, the state will say that they're 600 feet away, but folks, if you look where they were digging, they were from those real toxic sites that were identified as hot spots. They were less than 350 feet from that school. and the state said you can't go through contaminated site. We still haven't seen the document that said they maintained a 10-foot separation. So that's where we're at today, and that'll be very important as we go through our MS4 report that we have to stormwater management for the city next month. So.
Well, one of the interesting things is they have a drainage pond, which is just north of that. Well, there's never water in that holding pond because it goes through the soil. It gets into the granular fill underneath the sewer lines, and that's why you have mercury and other contaminants in Lost Lake. That's before we get to the sewage spills, folks. So we're talking about multiple sources of contamination in Lost Lake, and it's going to be flowing in there. But to show you the level of denial that we have, we'll play the next clip and we'll talk on the other side. This is Mark Larson, the superintendent.
Mark Larson, superintendent of schools, and thank you for being here. I enjoyed listening to a lot of the comments that we had before, and I enjoyed hearing the things tonight, and people speak about the passions that they have. The passion that I want you to speak about is education, and particularly about children, our youngest children. When this school is built, there'll be 600 of the most amazing kids, K2, and there'll be early childhood family education students, about 100 in that building, and it's going to be great. This is where students learn to read, and it's more than just taking an abstract symbol, putting it into a sound, and combining those sounds into meaning. It's opening worlds. It's creating new opportunities for kids. It's more than just getting the kids learning to count, but to add and to think and to be creative. And it's more than just the science. For example, on Thursday night, we had students present at the school board meeting about what they had done with chemical engineering. Second graders. They made new Play-Doh.
There we go for chemical engineering. They're making Play-Doh.
We got second grade engineers out there. And folks, there is nothing wrong. You can teach them on site. But that's the same gentleman that came down to the state legislature, which he says they do not legislate and get into it, but he got there and opposed that bill. Only 1 out of 334 school districts in the state of Minnesota that showed up to oppose that bill, putting a school on a dump site. He just had the fortune of having the state senator that's in charge of education finance in his district to help kill that bill. Folks, Erin Brockovich said she'd come down and testify on a Senate bill in the Environmental Committee. They never let it get that far. And it's going to show up. Chickens do come home to roost eventually.
Well, and right now they're, you know, and what he didn't mention too is the kids will learn how to glow in the dark so you can keep track of them.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and look, let's get realistic. The little kids go outside and play in the dirt. Yeah, they do, and they're putting in this unsafe environment, and it's because Chuck Uyghur killed this bill and allowed it to go through. There's a whole enough blame to go around, from Tom Carr putting it in a VIC site to him telling them, you know, having the sneaky meeting. Well, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Mayor Marshall's very complicit in this.
The last one, we're going to have another one with Erin Brockovich, and this is her talking about a school in Kentucky or Tennessee that was built on a former dump site and the results that happened. So if we could play that, control room.
Some girls from a school in Tennessee had contacted me, and there was about 30 of them. And I thought it was interesting, once they found each other again on Facebook, they all had cancer, all of them. So they went to Google, and Google didn't have a whole lot of information. So they thought, well, heck, maybe Erin Brockovich does. So we actually started looking at the information, and were able to trace them all back to the same high school, which had never been disclosed, was built on a top Class 1 hazardous waste dump. So a lot of times information doesn't get out there to people, and I think we're in.
So that's going to be interesting. We're probably going to have little kids graduating from high school, and gee whiz, they could have cancer. But again, this is part of it. This is just part and parcel. That is the long-term effects. What we're going to be talking about is the short-term effects. Again, the wastewater doesn't pool up on the site like it's supposed to. It goes right down through the soil to where that sewer line was put in, because there's granular fill underneath it, and it's downhill to Lost Lake and White Bear Lake, and we all know gravity takes over.
Yeah, Loren, and one thing I want to, and you'll see coming up in a clip soon, Mr. Dewesky, who lives over on the west side of Lost Lake over there, that's concerned. He's not only concerned about his family's health, but the health of the children that are going. We've been getting involved and taking a lot of time down to the state legislature to get involved. Folks, we don't have kids in that school district right now, but we realize that the kids are still the future, our future. So we're interested in their health. I mean, by us getting involved, it's actually taken a lot of time and energies away, but there is no monetary support for us. All this has to do about is protecting the children's health.
Larry, could you explain to the people a little bit about what an MS4 hearing is?
Yeah, MS4 is a stormwater management program, and it's all states have to do it. It's both federally and state mandated. They all have parts in it. It talks about stormwater runoff, but it's supposed to prevent toxic runoffs to getting into your stormwaters and stuff. One of them is a good example is your stormwater should not be making it into your sewer system, because then you're contaminating your sewer systems. Your stormwater shouldn't be going onto your neighbor's property and hauling in toxins. So we're in the middle of signing up for another 5-year program with the MS4 report here. They're going to do it every 5 years now, it looks like. And
they're trying to track runoff as part of what they're trying to do.
They're tracking it and trying to protect it. And folks, everything we've done here is exactly opposite what we should do to be preventing this, because they were told, and we have documentation here that says they should have put in well and septic, should have never had public sewer and water, exactly for that reason. Now we've done that. Now we'll show documentation that Lost Lake in 2000, and I'm going to say 10, like every other lake tested, had high nitrogen and phosphorus. Once they ran through that contaminated site, now that is one of the 4 lakes that got listed, and it was the only one on the endangered list that got added in Minnesota because of high mercury levels in fish. And it came from the Bel Air sanitation, and until our city can prove otherwise, but City of Grant and Matamidi has refused to acknowledge and even allow Mr. DeWesky to get some very basic questions answered.
Well, this brings us to the next clip. Tim DeWesky is going to be at the MS4 hearing, but because they require you have to have a public hearing on this, and he has asked a number of questions. A year ago he asked the questions, and here he is back asking the same questions. So if control room could play that, please.
MS4 meeting. I had Mr. Engelhardt present a 2-page document with questions on my behalf as I was in Los Angeles. I'm going to read again. Your MS4 permits, there were several questions, there were several paragraphs with background knowledge to bring everybody on the council up to date. 2 pages was summarized into 1 sentence. The City of Grant is not aware of any illicit discharges that are sourced from the Wildwood School site. Okay? I would like to know tonight at this MS4 public hearing, is your current stormwater testing data for the new Wildwood School shows that the sampling was done on dry ponds. Johnson family has routinely stated that these areas always held water. Did the school district or another governing body drain tile those ponds into 10 holding tanks and then pump them out into off-peak hours into a sewer system that was already running at limited capacity, causing a sewer spill of 440,000 gallons of raw sewage to be dumped in the early hours of October 4th? Or is it because of the aquifer in Washington County that flows east to west, starting at your Gateway Trail and flowing towards White Bear Lake, which is dry? Is that sucking those ponds dry? Who authorized the school project to proceed when documentation shows they needed to maintain a 10-foot separation of contaminated soils, and that in April of 1992, contamination had already spread 200 feet south of the dump, impacting 3 private residents? Please provide me with copies of your errors and omission clause your city planner and city attorney. It is obvious the health, safety, and general welfare of citizens has been at risk.
Well, I think he explained that pretty well. And you see there's a long history of environmental concern with this dump. And if 1992 they were already having contaminated wells for the people south of the dump site, then they build a track, basically a trench for all the stuff to follow, and there's no longer wetlands there or ponds that are collecting the water. Well, where is it going? Obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this is going in the granular fill to Lost Lake. And what I find interesting is local governments are continuing to compound mistakes. They're in denial. They're showing evidence. Oh, no, hide it, sweep it under the rug. And that's...
Loren, if I might interject, and he just said in that one letter that they're not aware of any illicit. Well, our city would not be aware of any illicit dumping because they were complicit in the dumping. That's why they wouldn't come out with it, folks. They've known it all along. If you listened to your city councilman Bonin and Mr. Potter, when this school first came to them, I asked them why they were not more involved in placing a school on a dump. Their answer as councilmen was simple. I don't have the time and energy to fight this. We, the three councilmen, are going to give it to him anyhow. Why should I put up a battle? And folks, the reason you put up the battle is because you should never put kids at risk. The biggest reason for any conditional use permit is for health, safety, and welfare. All three of those have violated the basics of a conditional use permit. Our mayor knew it. He entered into a quick joint powers agreement with Matamidi. They violated the comprehensive plans of both cities intentionally.
Well, shouldn't we ask those two if they got dog bones? Because usually if it rolls over, don't you get a dog bone?
Yeah.
But, that's exactly it. And here's interesting. We're going to continue on with the same MS4 hearing. We have, of course, Bob Zick is somewhat controversial. He has that Inside Insight program here on Channel 15, and he's always exposing government mistakes and problems and cover-ups. And, one of the things that we have is if we have transparency, we can put it in the light of day. Well, they keep putting cloaks over it. So this is a little bit longer one, but he is going after the same type of information. So if we could play that control room.
Mr. Huber, I'm a member of the press. It's not necessary to have my...
You are not a member of the press, sir. Give us your address.
You are not a mayor. You are a rude person that threatens people by saying, I'll put a red dot on your forehead. I'm glad Washington County is here. After the last meeting when Tina Loban's husband said, I'll meet you out in the parking lot.
Does this have something to do with the MS4 permitting, sir?
How this council runs.
Sir, does it have something to do with the MS4 permitting?
Yes,
or no,
I will
sir?
Start on that.
Thank you, sir.
Problematic if more than one of you would show up, more than 3 of you would show up at a meeting, a staff meeting. I guess they would have the intelligence to leave, or at least 1 or 2 of them leave. That's problematic. All right, let's start with this. First of all, when you are developing these new plans, it would be nice that they were out there so citizens could have them to look at them. That would be, I would think, basic protocol. Thank you. Next of all, this MS4 water runoff, the EPA turning it back to the municipality, managed stormwater runoff. This city gave the Matamidi School District a conditional use permit for that large new development called the elementary school. Now, there was part of that conditional use permit said that that site would have well and septic. There was also letters from the state of Minnesota that said that that soil was not to be broken below the topsoil so that the contaminants that were in that soil that was a dump, former Superfund site, would not follow the sewer lines back out. Well, that's exactly what happened, and now we have Lost Lake that is being contaminated.
Mr. Zick, I'm going to give you one more chance to speak about the MS4 permitting process
well,
that we're talking about, or I'm going to ask you to leave.
This is what
You have one more chance.
This is what the MS4 is supposed to be monitoring.
Last time, sir.
It's supposed to be monitoring those holding ponds over there with the stormwater management runoff. Now, 2 of those ponds, and your permit says that those ponds are supposed to be monitored and tested. That hasn't been done except one time. It's supposed to be done, what, 1 or 2 times a year. Hasn't been done. Now, 2 of those holding ponds for the runoff.
I'm not going to sit here and talk about the school project, which was,
well,
what, 2 years ago, sir? It is not. It is not. Mr. Zick, Mr. Zick, I'm going to ask you to have a seat, or I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
And
one or the other.
And that water is leaching out along
Your
that line.
theories are not part of our MS4 permitting process. Sir, I'm sorry, your theories are not part of that process. We're trying to pass our MS4, at least have some draft considerations.
Stormwater management.
Sir.
Isn't that the holding pond stormwater management?
Individual stormwater management ponds, I am not here to discuss. I am here to discuss the MS4 permitting process,
then
sir.
we need to say that
Sir,
if
you
there's
could certainly
MS4
write the school
ordinance
district and speak to
that
the school
does any
district.
kind of enforcement,
Mr. Zick.
it becomes a meaningless document.
Have a seat, sir.
We need to have.
Mr. Zick,
Mr. Phil,
have a seat, sir.
But what I want to hear.
I'm going to have you removed if you don't have a seat while our engineer goes ahead and
I
talks.
want a response here.
No, you can go ahead and have a seat while our engineer speaks.
I'm able to stand, thank you.
Deputy, I want Mr. Zick removed from the building, please.
Loren, did you notice the first thing he did is he says, I'm a reporter for Inside Insight, and if anybody should know, Mr. Huber has been your cable commissioner for 6 years. He has taken well between $10,000 to $12,000 benefit package. He gets over a $200 a month plus Comcast bill free of charge, and so he should know that Mr. Zick is an inside reporter. He should know he goes to all these meetings. When it came to the what was ironic is both Mr. Dewuski and Mr. Zick come and warned him about spillage and toxins, and 5 days after they got up and spoke and they removed him by having a deputy sheriff remove Mr. Zick, you had the second sewage spill going into Lost Lake, adding an additional up to 200,000 gallons of raw sewage dumped into that lake. I think they knew what they were talking about. Within 24 hours of that sewer spill, Mr. Zick had the document from Met Council in his hand as a reporter. I don't think Mr. Huber will get that report for another month at best. Is he a reporter? I believe Mr. Huber knows damned well he's a reporter, and he's a good one. So that's how he opened up, by threatening him and telling him that he isn't a reporter. Then he has him thrown out. You see, that's called a cover-up before it even gets out of the gate.
Well, speaking of cover-ups, the other interesting cover-up is the first spill was October 4th. And the spokesman from the Met Council said, oh yeah, that was because shifting in frost in the soil. Well, excuse me, October 4th, we don't have frost in the ground. You know, it probably doesn't come till the end of November, but they're using that as an excuse, feeding pablum to the masses, assuming they'll buy it, and they figure they can lie their way out of it. Again, that was the first spill, October 4th, that we just had a second spill. And
the important thing is we had an illegal city council meeting to give them a conditional use permit on April 24th, and that was at 5 o'clock back in, I think it was 2011 there. And within 2 hours after that meeting was scheduled, Mayor Carr was in a meeting at the city of Matamidi to enter into a joint powers agreement. Less than 2 days before that, the state sent them a letter that stated they wouldn't grant them a permit. Yet Carr was given a conditional use permit along with the mayor, so they're both complicit in there. Now we have it there, and they're both responsible for cleaning. That's what MS4 says. If you've got an illicit discharge, and it talks about in the illicit discharge in the MS4, they cannot allow subsurface, which means it's traveling through the ground. And that's exactly what we have. So now let's see if they'll stand up. And folks, we got the comprehensive plan from Matamita. Said they should have built it on OH, and why both of them thought it was a wiser choice to put a school on a dump site, Superfund site, than it was on Safe Deal is maybe it's because they neither one of them are rocket scientists. So I think it's time we get some people with some knowledge sitting in there. I mean, like I said, they both probably brought their paints and other stuff to that dump to dump off there. They knew it.
Well, the last clip we're going to show on this particular venue is Phil Olson, is our engineer who is in charge of doing the MS4, okay, and getting it signed off, which has to be done by next month, by the way. And it's very interesting because listen to him carefully. Basically, what he says in this very short clip, it's only 30 seconds, he's telling Deputy Mayor Huber that Zick was right. So if Control Room can play that.
With the school site, a lot of the language, if there was an issue, that's why a lot of the language does exist. Now, there hasn't been an issue on the site, so that's not necessarily relevant to this, but if there was an issue, a lot of this language would apply to that type of thing as it would to any other property in the city. It provides a mechanism to address the issues that are going on.
Good. So this is part of addressing these issues. Now,
There. So they said there hasn't been an incident on the site. That is not true. They have holding ponds that have nothing in them. Well, where is that water going? Well, obviously, the water's seeping underground. They've broke the top seal of the dump, and it's going underground, which MS4 does, in fact, regulate, and it's going to the granular fill underneath the sewer mound, and that's how it's getting to Lost Lake. And they're not willing to admit this. They have yet to have approval for their sewer line that was put in because it wasn't supposed to be within 10 foot of the old dump site. And we have pictures of the pile where they dug, and you can see the different garbage, and we've had that on the show before, where you can see where they excavated things, and there's all kinds of trash in there. So they definitely did put illegally or against guidelines, put the sewer line in, and now we're seeing the results of them violating the recommendations. The toxins are spilling from the dump site that was sealed with clay. It's now going outside the dump sites, heading into lakes, and
the aquifers. We got documentation not only going through the surface water ending into Lost Lake, but they've also shown and tested they have mercury in the aquifer for the wells next to Lost Lake. So folks, these didn't show up prior to the school being built on there. And I want to congratulate our engineer, because I think he is probably one of the more sane ones sitting up there. I think the idea of being deputy mayor got to Mr. Brad Huber's ego out there, because the first thing he did is he attacked Mr. Zick, but Phil Olson said that's exactly what the MS4 is. That is a place you are to come out and voice your opinions. So for him to throw them out actually violated his freedom of speech right. And you should be able to go up there and speak at a public podium. He was right on topic. There was no reason for him to be thrown out other than the fact that he was exposing something the city's not willing to listen to.
Okay, well, the last clip we have relating to this is Carol Levin did a story on this. And I think it really makes the point well. It brings it all home and ties it all together.
Keep in mind, Loren, remember that the hearing and testimony you heard at last month's City Council meeting on the MS4 report, this spill happened just these gentlemen tried to come out and tell you you overcapacitated your lines, you're bringing in all these toxins, and this was the result. This happened just 5 days after they spoke.
Well, the other interesting thing is, too, this is a line that was put in 1960, and they have all these tanks for the school. The Wildwood School area uses more water than and the school district uses more water than the rest of the city of Mahtomedi.
Yep, because they're the highest water user.
Well, and of course their brilliant idea was, well, we'll sneak it through in off-capacity hours. Well, when do you think the breaks happen? Both breaks have happened as a result. In the middle of the morning. In the middle of the morning, on the weekend when the school is emptying their multiple storage tanks. Okay, so control room, let's go to this CARE 11 clip, please. Thank you.
Residents of Mattavita, as the city deals with a big sewage spill.
It is the second spill in a matter of months. Met Council officials say at least 25 to 40,000 gallons of raw sewage seeped out onto the partially frozen Lost Lake. They don't know yet how much may have gotten into the water. Jay Olstead is here with more on this developing story. Jay?
Yeah, Julie, officials suspect this spill was caused by an aging pipe that broke after thawing caused it to shift. And while they claim any sewage in the water will decompose over time, neighbors are not convinced.
It wasn't pretty.
Tim DeWiski used to love the beauty surrounding his fourth-generation home on Lost Lake.
I could smell it.
Now, it just makes him sick.
It was bubbling out of the ground just like crude oil coming out.
He's talking about tens of thousands of gallons of raw sewage seen here that he and other neighbors witnessed spewing out of a busted pipe yesterday afternoon into their Matamidi Lake.
Could have been running for days before I found it.
The Metropolitan Council says it was able to suck up a lot of the sewage water since yesterday, but doesn't know how much was released. Early estimates have it at least 25 to 40,000 gallons.
I call it the volcano.
That's nothing.
It's starting to have a smell.
Tim's wife Sheila has pictures of the last sewage spill from the same pipe in October, where officials say up to 430,000 gallons of sewage got into the lake.
Started seeing brown water back in June.
That's when they claim they told Matamidi officials, which they say told them what they told us today. It's a Met Council line.
They did water quality sampling.
Met Council has put up signs warning people about the potential danger, but don't believe it's a long-term impact. How does that not impact the lake?
It, in the larger scheme of things, it's a small impact on the lake. It's a one-time release of wastewater to the lake.
Met Council has permanently shut down the broken pipe. This, as neighbors are concerned with the lake's health and their own.
And I'm worried that this is going to get into my drinking water.
Now, Met Council says the water did not seep down far enough to impact well water. That said, Tim DeWiski hired an attorney about a month ago to help investigate this issue. Guys.
Wow, a follow-up story would be great on that in the summer. That's so unfortunate. Thank you, Jay.
Yep.
There. Well, you know, it's cover-up after cover-up. Everybody's pointing their fingers. Whose fault is it? You know, denial is not a good defense.
Well, you know, when they come in and start doing the investigation, and folks, had we simply allowed Mr. DeWiski to come speak at the city council when they asked over a year ago, you and I weren't sitting on the council, although I don't have made much of an effect anyhow, if they had listened to him, if Matamidi would have listened to him, he wouldn't have to retain an attorney. And the attorney he happened to have is, I believe it's Richard Allen, who representing White Bear Lake and the DNR right now, because he's concerned. When you contaminate Lost Lake and Lost Lake overflows into White Bear Lake, you're affecting the home values of all the residents around White Bear Lake. And it's a great resource to have out there, and it didn't have to happen. It's poor leadership. And Loren, you sat on the Planning Commission as chairman. And I was at every one of those meetings. I'll bet you 90% of the people that came and talked against putting a school on a dump site. But like I said, they had the votes. All they had to do, they knew all they had to do was sit for the required hearings. They were going to get what they wanted anyhow.
That's right. Well, here's something else. You can't see it, but the headline is 4 more locals listed as impaired. Lost Lake was added to the list because of high mercury levels found in fish. And you're probably asking, well, where did that mercury come from? Well, prior to 1972, when it was the electric company before it was what it is today, what was the name of it?
XL Energy.
Before it was XL.
It was NSP.
It was NSP. They would take that oil from the transformers and they would put it in 55-gallon barrels and haul it out to Bel Air Sanitation. Well, the owner of Bel Air Sanitation, he's long gone now. Of course, several of the members have died from cancer.
Every one of the family members, that's how you go.
And they would run over the barrels because the barrels took space and the materials would leach into the ground. Well, prior to 72 and earlier, one of the things that you found in that oil, in addition to PCBs, was mercury. That's where the mercury is coming from. It isn't coming from anywhere else.
Oh, it's coming from your lead paints, your batteries they took gopher oil, they took Towsley, Ford, NSP brought stuff out there, 3M brought stuff out there. It was an unregulated dump. That's the first place I'd want to put my kids.
Yeah, and again, these things keep coming up and they're continually in denial. And we haven't seen the last of it yet. We'll keep you folks current. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, there's a book here with every one of these is not just a tab. There's tons of documentation over here. Folks, I think it's time we wake up and acknowledge what they did. And one thing in an MS4 report, it says that there's an illicit discharge. The people responsible shall have the responsibility of cleaning it up. And I don't know how you clean up a lake and you clean up an aquifer, especially when you knowingly allowed this to happen.
Well, you'd make them drink bottled water.
Well, that's exactly. One of the family members that live from the Bel Air Sanitation says that's all they would drink over was bottled water. And his mother passed away of cancer, his dad passed away with cancer, his sister passed away with cancer, his brother about a year ago passed away with cancer. They all know how they're leaving.
Yep.
And why are we exposing our kids that are just developing their immune systems to that?
That's just crazy. That's one of the things that
I don't think that, is that on the open enrollment program? Is that when they say, hey, come to Wildwood Elementary, sign up, let's put your kids in a toxic dump site and see how they turn out?
Well, they'll be easier to keep track of because they glow in the dark. You'll know where they are. So anyway, well, are we ready to shift gears to the charter?
Yeah, I think it's about time we go on to something a little different.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Charter Commission again, and as some of you know, a charter is a constitution above the city that gives direction to the mayor and the council. You see, because other than that, unless the mayor and council people commit felonies, they have free reign, they can do what they want. And one of the problems we have in Grant, we have a great concern, is in this last couple of years they started passing ordinance kind of willy-nilly. They had a special event ordinance they passed. They may put holes in it large enough to drive a Mack truck through, and they have the wedding barn. And now the wedding barn, after 5 violations, without a review, I might add, are coming back for a liquor license. Well, gee, that makes sense. I get 5 speeding tickets, and I'm going to go in and get my commercial driver's license, right?
You should.
But what we're saying is, and then they also did the supper club thing, and they're allowing leapfrog development, which the Metropolitan Council said, because we don't have sewer and water, we're not allowed to do. So the farthest extreme northwest corner, they allow a wedding barn. Exact in the east side, 2/3 the way up, they're allowing this supper club right next to endangered trout stream, Browns Creek.
And that's amazing. They've got to fill out an MS4 report before they can put that together and even just have a supper club, much less a school on a Superfund site.
And, you know, so
I guess we're more concerned about that trout that's going through there than we are our kids.
Yeah. And the other thing is, the concerns we have is keeping Grant rural and keeping the tone and texture of the community that people move into. And it also is keeping sewer and water out of Grant because, like they've seen in Lake Elmo down the road, all it takes is 3 people from the city council to say yes and let Met Council come in. Well, what Lake Elmo did is they signed up for sewer and water for the commercial area along 94, and they didn't read the fine print that said they have to take 1,700 homes. And that's kind of like buying a new car and says, yeah, man, I'll take the new car, but I don't want the payments.
Yep.
Well, if you sign a contract, you are bound by the conditions therein. If you agree to it, you don't have to agree to it. And so one of the things in keeping Grant rural and keeping sewer out, we're building that in to the charter to keep Grant rural and require a 51% vote of individuals to have sewer and water. So it isn't just going to be 3 or 5 people say, yeah, we think it's a good idea. It's going to take more of the citizens to say.
It's going to take a democracy. And it's a little bit pure form of democracy. And
well, excuse me, Larry, how does that work in the fiefdom of Carr?
Not very well, obviously, unless you're one of the 3 on the city council. And one of the things that, you know, we wrote a good document. It's taken 1.5 to 2 years to produce this.
And I've been filming that, so I've been watching it carefully and putting it on. And the interesting thing is, they took the Stillwater charter, and that's been around for 150 years. So they took a document that has been tweaked over the 150 years to meet modern conditions, because there are some state statutes that supersede some of those things, like road abandonment, etc. And they took that, tweaked it to fit ours, used it as a template, and they've really worked hard to come up with an excellent document. And
it's finally written, Loren, and we sent it out to Attorney Dave Magnuson for review. And so once it's sent back, he took it back with him. We discussed some language. It could be a little cleaned up. And once it's done, you're going to find that your 2 votes were well worthwhile that saved that Charter Commission. And the Citizens Grant supported the Charter Commission before they even had a finished document. Wait till they get to find out what's in there. We will really be supporting it, because this is something our city needs.
Well, you had mentioned Dave Magnuson, the attorney, and that's who is paid to review this. Why don't we have Control Room play the first clip, and he's talking about his opinion about this particular charter. Control Room?
Yes. So, the detriments, there aren't many when you have a spare document like this. In other words, the city uses 429 on improvement projects, 462 on planning. There's so many street vacations. Charters used to have a special procedure for that. And even now, that's changed. So the state law can be followed. And so I see very little downside to having one. It gives the community a certain identity and some advantages.
Great. Thank you. One last question.
Well, that is independent legal opinion of the charter as it's been written so far. They've put a lot of work into this. Like I said, I've been the one filming it and trying to bring it to Channel 16, because Mayor Carr has fought this down the line. We have some interesting things coming along in here too. He won't let them meet in the city hall. He won't give them funding. A matter of fact, we called one of the helpers here, the engineers, to run the camera, so I wouldn't have to. And because it's very complicated to run some of this stuff, and I'm not always successful. Sometimes I have to have a backup camera, which I did this last time because something didn't work right. He called the young man that did that and tried to intimidate him and telling him he was doing something illegal. Then they had the petition, which was worded incorrectly. Then Mayor Carr called an independent special meeting just to approve the rehabbed petition that they had. And it's just real interesting what they've done, the extremes they've went to get around and not have this there. So if we can play the next clip that's closely related to the last one, please.
No, I don't think I think you got a good document.
Thank you. Considering that none of us have ever done anything like this, we take the compliment gladly.
Yeah. No.
Actually, I'd like to thank you because we used your Stillwater document as a template to start off of, along with reviewing other ones, but we kind of try to do a hybrid more to suit our city.
Yeah.
Because your city obviously is a little different.
There, and that gives you a little bit of the history. In the next clip, what's going to be interesting, the chair of the Charter Commission mailed the complete, updated 219 revision to the mayor and all the information that was with it. And you will see him once again, you'll see him stumble through this. There was a clip where he denied ever getting it. Oh, you mean you sent it to the clerk?
Well, I think I actually had to tell him it was over at the city, on our city website. And it took us a little over a year and a half, almost 2 years to get that onto the city website. So
they've been fighting pretty hard. So if we, control room, we play the next one.
The last updated charter I had was the 216 document. Is that what everybody else was looking at?
No.
Okay, because we did make some changes, I think. At the last meeting,
that was included in the 219. It says final draft. Final draft of the charter as of 2/19/2015 is including the changes we made in February.
I didn't get it.
I didn't get it either.
I don't have it either.
Madam Chair, if I may, you've done a pretty good job forwarding to our city clerk. And before I came this evening, I printed off our city website the most recent, and that's one we're looking at right now that's been reworked. So if the members would just go before the to our city website and they can pull it up for the meeting, they'll have the most recent.
Okay, it should say final document.
Okay, and does our esteemed attorney here have the current, the 219 document?
He's got that.
That was my only concern. That was.
Here.
Well, Lauren, you can see the mayor once again comes to the meeting unprepared. He didn't have the recent draft that got sent out for revision. The other members of the Charter Commission seem to have it over there. And it was emailed to all Charter Commission members before the meeting. Just as sitting on a city council, we get our packet about a week. Mine comes a little later because it gets sent in the mail.
Yeah.
That being said, we get our packet. Had he taken the time to read his email before he come to the meeting, he might have understood. Then he could follow when Mr. Magnuson is reviewing, go there. He gets halfway through the meeting and he says, well, what document are you reading from? Folks, all you have to do is come prepared. And I think the only reason he wants to sit on that city council is because he gets $300 a month or per meeting to come and sit on that city council.
Probably more than he makes selling his bottom real estate. Okay, the other interesting thing is, too, they've fought us hand and tooth, and last month we showed you that he didn't know when the years ran from the city council. He thought it was March to March, and it wasn't. We corrected him on that. We corrected him on a number of other things. Well, the problem is, by statute, I think it's 410, they are supposed to be giving a minimum of $1,500 per year to the Charter Commission. And the chair went out and got the name tags. She submitted the bill. She got 2 letters from the attorney saying she was in violation and he was doing things illegally. And of course, the city attorney is nothing more than a lapdog for Tom Carr, who is basically missing in action. But why don't we, and this attorney addresses that issue with the funding. So if we could play that, control room.
Legal standing does a Charter Commission have as far as submitting bills?
Well, you could bring an action in the conciliation court against the city council for $1,500.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's in the statute. I mean, they got to pay that. They do.
Okay.
You suggest, though, that we work with the city council?
Yeah, then there's a law on unpaid claims to you can. When the government owes something, I mean, there's interest and everything is due.
As I told you, that's why we're meeting in Montemita and not in the city hall as you asked.
So would we be able to do that for the first 2 years that we met and we didn't get?
In other words, they can go back 2 years.
That'll be pretty interesting, folks, won't it? Here it's if you go to resolution, and I believe it's 2013-08, the city of Grant deems it in the city's best interest to become a charter commission. Then he turns around and he says, well, but we aren't going to give any money to work, and you can't meet in our city hall. The attorney general says that's illegal. And so I think we have great standing to take them to conciliation court. And I think as a charter commission, I'd be interested in going back there and getting our first, actually, we've been going for 2 years, Lauren, without $1 it was ever spent to the city dollars. And statute says you can pay $1,500. And we asked him what Stillwater pays on theirs, and he says, you know, they pay every bill that comes in for the charter commission because a charter commission is good for their city. Their charter commission and their city council works hand in hand. They support each other. Not quite that way in Grant.
But one of the things I want to point out, Larry, did you notice the response from the reviewing attorney? It was laughter. He was laughing that the city council would not honor the law paying for their own funding of their own... well,
they won't follow statute, and it's their recommendation, so it's very interesting, and I think let's grab this next clip.
The last clip, and what this clip is Steve Bonin, who didn't run again. He was the road commissioner, did an excellent job. He was offered to go to the city council and make requests. And here's the response that we got.
Copy of the 5 questions that I posed to the city, and I'll just read through them real quick for anybody that was watching on TV. The first question I asked the council, would the council support an expenditure in excess of $1,500 for a legal review of the charter document? Number 2, could the city accept a donation from private citizens to be applied directly to the charter expense line item? Number 3, would the council consider keeping a special election in-house rather than contracting it out to the county? Number 4, would the council support an expenditure for educational materials to help residents understand exactly what becoming a charter means? And the last question, number 5, what is the intention of the council regarding our legal newspaper? And my appearance at the council was well received, and I put the questions out. They had discussion on each one of these items. They pretty much, on all 5, they agreed that they needed to have the staff work on a response. And at the end of the 5 questions, they did take a vote to have the attorney and staff put together some answers for us. So they did authorize the use of staff time to give back some answers. I did check with the clerk administrator today, and she did not have the responses yet for us for this meeting tonight, but I should have them shortly, and when I do get them, I'll forward them to Barb, and she can forward the document on to everyone. So
okay,
that is where it was left.
That gives the staff time, Nick Vivian, to come up with a roadblock why they can't do it.
Well, not only that, he said, you know, folks, just been on that city council for 6 years. You tell me he can't make a decision without staff? If that's the case, I think it's time he sit down, and the mayor comes to meetings unprepared. I think they've been there too long. It's time to clean house.
Well, we need to start moving forward. Hopefully we're going to get this charter.
What they've done, and pay really close attention, folks, they have turned every decision over to our staff that does not live in our city. We are not being represented by our elected officials. They simply stay home, let the staff take care of it. I'll come and get the paycheck. Lauren, we've got documentation. We understand what we're talking about. I wish they would sit up and pay attention.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Not only that, I've had several constituents call me, and they're very concerned about the increase in property taxes for that new levy, especially when Chuck Uyghur changed the funding schedule. Now on North St. Paul's $8 million in the hole, and Montemita is going to have $6 million surplus. But anyway, that's about what we have for the show, folks.
Well, we do have, and we got a minute here, Lauren. I wish you'd understand that if you live in the city of Grant and you have a comparable, let's say $400,000 home, $300,000 to $400,000 home in the Stillwater district and one in the Matamidi district, I hope you understand, once you got your tax statement this last week here, that the house in Matamidi is $1,000 your taxes higher to be in a Matamidi school district to be in Stillwater district. So I think it's important you go to your tax board and say enough is enough. You know, since open enrollment, abusive open enrollment in Matamidi, we have slipped from #1 in the state down to #12.
Well, not only that, the State Department's reviewed it, and they've abused the open enrollment policy and not instituted properly. But that's about all we have for this show, folks. I'm glad you were with us. Come join us next month, and we'll update you. There's a very, very heavy agenda for the City Council, and we'll let you know what's happening all around Grant.